Welcome to Rosentosa channel. In this story, the man was shocked when he saw a photo of the little girl's younger brother. Stay tuned to find out why he was so startled.
A poor girl sells lemonade in front of a hospital and says to the young billionaire, "Pay me whatever you can. The doctor won't operate on my little brother without the money." But when she shows him the boy's photo, the billionaire is stunned. The boy looks identical to him as a child. Ellie sat on a chair in the hospital waiting room, her legs swinging and barely touching the floor. Through the slightly open door of the doctor's office, she could see her mother talking to Dr. Phillips. Noah, her little brother, was in the pediatric ward, asleep after yet another episode. "Ma'am, Noah needs this surgery," the doctor explained, his tone both gentle and firm. "His condition is getting worse, and we can't just continue with medication alone." "And how much would this procedure cost, doctor?" Ellie's mother, Lauren, asked, clutching her purse tightly. The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. "With all the expenses, we're talking about approximately $20,000. Ellie saw her mother's face turn pale. $20,000? But that's impossible for us right now. The doctor glanced at his notes. "We can try to find some financing options. There are also organizations that help families in situations like yours." Lauren nodded, but her eyes were already brimming with tears. When they left the office, she sat beside Ellie and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook as she cried silently. "Mommy, don't cry," Ellie said, hugging her. "Noah's gonna get better, I promise." Lauren quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile. "Of course he will, honey. We'll figure something out." That night, while her mother spoke softly on the phone trying to find a solution, Ellie had an idea. On a TV show they watched together, a kid sold lemonade to buy a toy. If it worked for that child, why wouldn't it work for her? The next morning, Ellie convinced her mother, "Can I sell lemonade outside, please, to help Noah?" Lauren was exhausted, but the excitement in her daughter's eyes sparked a small glimmer of hope in her tired gaze. "You really want to do that, honey?" "Yes, I'll make a lot of money, you'll see. It'll help Noah get better." Her mother smiled for the first time in days. "Sure, my love, we can try." Together, they made lemonade in the hospital cafeteria's kitchen. One of the nurses, moved by the girls' determination, helped them get a folding table and materials for a sign. "Lemonade, help Noah," Ellie wrote in big, colorful letters. They chose a spot on the sidewalk by the hospital's side entrance, where many people passed by. With the table set up, the pitcher of lemonade and disposable cups lined up, Ellie took a photo of Noah out of her pocket, placed it in a makeshift foil frame, and set it on the table. "Lemonade, help my little brother. Any amount helps," she shouted to passers-by, her voice determined and full of hope. Doctors in white coats, hurried nurses, visitors carrying flowers, all smiled at little Ellie. Some stopped, dropped a few coins, and went on their way. After hours, she looked at the glass jar. It held only a few dollars. 50,000 might as well have been an impossible mountain to climb. The afternoon sun was already going down when a man in a dark suit hurried by on the sidewalk next to the hospital. Tall, impeccably poised, checking his watch and talking. On his cell phone. Sir, would you like to buy lemonade?" Ellie called, waving energetically. "It's to help my little brother." Miles, an executive at an investment firm, was running late to an important meeting. He paused briefly out of politeness. "How much?" he asked, already pulling out his wallet. "Any amount. It's for my little brother. He needs a really expensive surgery," Ellie replied. And before Miles could react, she took out a laminated photo and held it out to him. "Look, this is my little brother. His name is Noah." Miles took the photo out of courtesy, but when his eyes settled on the image, something strange happened. The boy's face, his eyes, his chin, his smile, was like looking at his own childhood photo. A chill ran down his spine. The resemblance was uncanny. Without a word, Miles pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and handed it to Ellie. He handed back the photo quickly, muttered a "good luck," and walked away briskly. He needed to get to his meeting. "Wow, $100! Ellie's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Thank you so much, sir." Miles just nodded and hurried off. He had a meeting and needed to focus, but as he walked, the image of that child stayed stuck in his mind. He came to a sudden stop in the middle of the sidewalk. People maneuvered around him, giving annoyed looks, but he barely noticed. Who was that boy? And why did he look so much like Miles in his childhood photos? Miles glanced at his watch. He was officially late for his meeting. He pushed those thoughts aside and quickened his pace, turning his attention to the work ahead. Still, the image of that child who looked exactly like him lingered in the back of his mind, an unanswered question. Miles walked into his apartment on the 30th floor, tossed his keys on the marble table, and loosened his tie. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights shone like fallen stars. On any other night, he would have admired the view or opened a bottle of expensive wine to celebrate the deal he had closed that day. But not tonight. The meeting had been a success. They discussed numbers, signed contracts, shook hands. He smiled and made jokes at the right moments. No one noticed his distraction. Years of practice hiding his emotions had served him well. Now alone, the image of that boy in the photo returned with full force. Miles took off his jacket and poured himself some whiskey. The amber liquid burned his throat, but it didn't chase away the strange feeling that had been following him since his encounter with the little lemonade seller. He walked to his office. In the second drawer of his desk, he kept an old photo album. It wasn't something he showed anyone. Images of a time he preferred not to revisit. He opened the album carefully. The first pages were empty. He had removed all photos of his mother and father years ago. But his childhood photos remained, preserved like insects in amber. Miles was 3 years old in the first photo. Light brown hair, big, curious eyes, a shy smile. He ran his fingers over the image, feeling the old texture. It was undeniable. The boy in the photo, Noah, could easily be mistaken for him in this picture. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same face. Even the way he smiled was identical. Impossible, Miles muttered to the empty apartment. He turned the page. More pictures of him growing up, at the park, in school, at birthday parties where he didn't smile. The resemblance to the lemonade kid was disturbing in all of them. Miles closed the album and returned to the living room, whiskey in hand and his thoughts swirling. He sank into an exclusive designer sofa that had cost more than many people earn in a year, the kind of comfort money could buy. But comfort wasn't coming. Maybe it was just a coincidence. The world was full of people who resembled one another. There were scientific studies on doppelgangers, lookalikes who had no genetic ties at all. Miles stood, restless, and walked to the window. Down below, the city continued its life. Cars moving, people returning home, stories unfolding in every lit window. What was that boy's story? Noah. Why did he need surgery? Which hospital was that? Who was that woman? Lauren. The children's mother? Questions that shouldn't matter. Not to him, Miles. The man who built his life on facts, figures, and contracts. The man who never allowed sentimentality to sway him. He went back to the bar and poured another whiskey. The clock read 11:42 p.m. Tomorrow he had a video conference with Japanese investors at 6 a.m. He should be reviewing numbers, preparing arguments, sleeping. Instead, he was drinking and thinking about a face that mirrored his own past. Miles returned to the office and leafed through the album again. Each turned page brought more evidence of the eerie similarity. A photo of him at 6, standing next to a Christmas tree, now seemed especially disturbing. The same serious expression he had seen on Noah's face, even in a picture where the child was smiling. He carefully removed one of the photographs, him at 3, sitting on a park bench with a toy in his hand. The photo had yellowed edges and a small crease in the corner. He placed it on the table and stared at it for long minutes. It wasn't just a casual resemblance. It was as if that boy, Noah, was him in another life. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. He needed sleep, needed to prepare for tomorrow. His life was organized, efficient, predictable. There was no room for mysteries or inexplicable coincidences. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Noah's face, and Ellie, determined at her lemonade stand. Miles slipped the photo into his shirt pocket instead of returning it to the album. An impulsive gesture, something rare for a man who calculated every move. For the first time in a long while, something personal had broken through his emotional walls. This wasn't a business problem he could solve with money or influence. It was deeper, more personal, a face he couldn't get out of his head, a question left unanswered. Who was Noah? And why, of all the people on that busy sidewalk, had he stopped at Ellie's stand at that exact moment? Miles took the last sip of whiskey, feeling the weight of those questions, questions he knew wouldn't let him sleep that night. 3 days went by, but the boy's image never left Miles's mind for a second. The old photo he had taken from the album stayed in his wallet, a constant reminder of the mystery he couldn't explain. He tried to follow his routine, meetings, video calls, lunches with clients. But behind the professional facade, his mind kept drifting to that sidewalk, to the lemonade stand, to Noah's face. On the morning of the 4th day, while sipping his coffee in the minimalist kitchen of his apartment, Miles made a decision. The coffee grew cold in its cup while he stared at the city through the window. He couldn't go on like this, the doubt eating him up inside. He was a man of action, someone who solved problems. This was just another problem to solve. He grabbed his phone and did something he'd never done before. He called his assistant and cancelled his afternoon appointments, practically unheard of in his career. "Is everything all right, Mr. Morton?" she asked, clearly surprised. "Yes, Jennifer. I just need to deal with a personal matter." "Personal?" The surprise in her voice was evident. In 5 years working for him, Miles had never mentioned personal matters. "Yes. Please reschedule. The meeting's for tomorrow." After hanging up, he changed his suit for jeans and a grey sweater, trying to look less intimidating. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. Who was this man staring back at him? A successful executive about to embark on a mission that made no sense based on what? A physical resemblance, a little girl's observation? Even so, he grabbed his keys and drove his imported car to the hospital where he had found Ellie. During the drive, he tried to organize his thoughts. What would he say when he got there? "Hello, I think your son looks like me when I was a kid. Does that mean something?" It sounded ridiculous, even in his own head. There was a good chance he wouldn't even find the girl. Maybe she had only been selling lemonade that one day. Maybe her brother was already discharged. Maybe. But there she was. In the same spot, at the same makeshift table. The sign looked a little more worn, the letters a bit faded, but Ellie's smile was as bright as ever. Something within him, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying, relaxed at the sight of her. Miles parked the car and walked slowly toward the stand. His heart was beating faster, something that never happened in multi-million-dollar negotiations. Yet here, in front of a child selling lemonade, he felt as nervous as a teenager. "Hi, sir, want to buy some lemonade?" Ellie yelled when she saw him approaching, not recognizing him immediately. Miles smiled. "Hey, Ellie, remember me? I was here a few days ago." Her eyes widened in recognition. "I do. You gave $100. That was the most money I ever got in one day." "How's your brother?" Miles asked, trying to sound casual as he approached the table. "A little better," she replied, pouring a cup of lemonade without him even asking. Her small fingers worked with surprising efficiency. "Mom says we're raising money really fast thanks to nice people who come by, but there's still a lot to go." Miles accepted the cup, taking a small sip. It was too sweet, but he smiled in appreciation. "You come here every day?" "Almost every day. Except when it rains a lot, or when I have to stay with Noah while Mom rests a bit." "And your dad? Does he help too?" Miles tried, keeping the tone light but feeling his stomach tighten as he asked the question. Ellie's smile faltered a bit. She looked down, then back up at Miles with an expression that seemed oddly adult for such a small child. "Daddy went to heaven. It was last year." Miles felt a pang in his chest. "I'm sorry to hear that, Ellie." She shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned, but there was pain in her eyes. "It's okay. Mom says he watches over us from up there. Did you know you look like my dad? Except you have a beard and different hair." Miles froze, the cup halfway to his mouth. That casual statement, delivered with the honest directness only a child can muster, hit him like a punch to the gut. "I look like him?" "Uh-huh. You have the same nose and the same eyes." She tilted her head, observing him curiously. "Did you know my dad?" Miles swallowed. "No, I didn't." What was his name?" "Ryan. Ellie answered, folding some napkins absent-mindedly. Ryan Carter. Something shifted inside Miles. The name echoed in his mind. Ryan Carter. A man he had never met, but who, according to a child, looked just like him. A man who had died, leaving 2 kids behind, one of them gravely ill. "Is your mum here at the hospital today?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he put the cup back on the table. Ellie nodded, straightening a few plastic cups. "She's with Noah right now, room 206. Do you think I could talk to her? Maybe I can help with your brother's treatment." Even to his own ears, the excuse sounded flimsy, but Ellie didn't seem to notice. "Sure, she talks to people who want to help all the time." Miles hesitated for a moment. "Would it be okay if I went upstairs to speak to her?" "Yes," Ellie answered enthusiastically. "It's on the 2nd floor, room 206. You can say Ellie sent you." Miles thanked her and entered the hospital. As he climbed the stairs, his heart pounded erratically. What was he doing? What would he say when he met the children's mother? This anxiety, this search for answers. Everything felt so unlike his usually methodical and rational self. Ryan Carter, a man who had died, a man who apparently was his look-alike. Coincidence or something else? The possibility creeping into his mind seemed absurd, yet strangely inevitable. Miles observed the hospital's daily rhythm as he waited, nurses coming and going, doctors reviewing charts, families arriving with anxious expressions. A completely different world from his own, yet somehow, for reasons he couldn't explain, connected to his fate. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 30s exited the hospital's side door. Brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, deep circles. Under her eyes, simple clothes. Despite clear signs of exhaustion, there was a natural beauty to her face, a quiet strength in her posture. "Mommy," Ellie waved enthusiastically, "there's a man who wants to talk to you. He wants to help." "Noah!" Lauren approached with a weary smile, extending her hand to Miles, who was partially hidden in the shadow of a tree. "Hello, I'm Lauren Cart." The words died on her lips when Miles stepped forward, leaving the shadow. Color drained from her face. Her outstretched hand froze mid-air. For a moment it looked like she had seen a ghost. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes scanning every detail of Miles's face. Who are you?" Miles felt a lump in his throat. "My name is Miles Morton. I came by a few days ago and bought lemonade from Ellie." Lauren continued to stare at him, eyes wide in shock. Her hand, still suspended, trembled slightly. She pulled it back, pressing it against her chest, as if to steady her heart. "You look identical to my husband," she finally managed, her voice shaking. "He never mentioned he had a brother." Not that I know of," Miles answered, equally unsettled by her reaction, which confirmed what Ellie had said. Seeing Lauren's genuine shock made it all feel very real. Ellie glanced from one to the other, confused. "Mommy, why do you look like that?" Lauren blinked rapidly, trying to collect herself. She wiped her face as though shaking off the shock. "It's nothing, honey. It's just that Mr. Morton looks a lot like your dad, doesn't he?" "That's what I told him," Ellie replied proudly. "Except Daddy didn't have a beard." Lauren took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Her eyes never left Miles's face, as though afraid he might vanish if she blinked. "Ellie, sweetheart, can you stay here a little longer? I need to talk to Mr. Morton." "Sure, Mommy. I already sold 3 cups today." Lauren motioned for Miles to follow her, walking toward a small garden away from the hospital's main entrance. Her steps were unsteady, as though her legs might give out at any moment. Miles followed, sensing the tension radiating from her, the fragility that seemed to surround her like a force field. The little garden was a quiet spot with a few worn wooden benches and simple flower beds, a place where people likely came to process difficult news or find a moment of peace. Once they were far enough away from the crowds, Lauren turned to face him again. Her eyes were wet, a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Who are you, really?" she asked, a blend of fear and hope in her voice. "Exactly who I said. Miles Morton. I'm 34 years old, I work in finance. I came here because..." He hesitated, unsure how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself, how to put into words the unease that had consumed him for days. because when I saw Noah's photo, I was stunned by the resemblance. And now, Ellie tells me I look like her father, your husband. Lauren studied him intently as though looking for something in his face. Her eyes scanned every detail, every line, seeking some flaw, some proof that this was just a cruel coincidence. Ryan died 11 months ago. A car accident. Her voice broke, the pain still raw. He was 34 too. And yes, you look frighteningly alike. I'm sorry for your loss, Miles said automatically, while his mind processed the information. The same age, same appearance. A chill swept through him. Lauren shook her head, as if still unable to believe what she was seeing. She sank onto one of the benches, her legs finally giving out under the weight of the situation. You said Morton? Ryan was Carter. Ryan Carter. Lauren crossed her, arms as if trying to protect herself. He was adopted as a baby. He never knew his biological parents. His adoptive parents have also passed away. Miles felt his blood run cold. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance but feeling an inexplicable bond with this woman he'd just met. I was adopted too. The silence that followed seemed to have a physical weight. They stared at each other, connecting the dots, leading to an almost unbelievable conclusion. A soft breeze rustled the leaves around them, like a whisper of fate. When is your birthday? Lauren asked, her voice barely a whisper. April 17th. She closed her eyes as though she'd been struck. A tear slipped free, sliding silently down her cheek. Ryan's birthday was April 17th. Miles felt his mind reel. The pieces fit together in a way that could no longer be ignored or dismissed as coincidence. Ryan Carter wasn't just someone who looked like him. It was much more. The possibility once deemed absurd now glowed with near certainty. He never searched for his biological family, Miles managed to ask, his own voice sounding strange in his ears. Lauren shook her head, wiping the tear with the back of her hand. He talked about it sometimes, especially after Noah was born. He said it would be good to know the family's medical history just in case, but he always put it off. She looked at the sky, as though seeking answers. He was afraid of finding out he had been abandoned for a bad reason, that he wasn't wanted. The word resonated in Miles. Wanted. He had never questioned his origins deeply, why his birth parents gave him up for adoption. But now a new question arose. If he and Ryan were who he suspected, why had they been separated? What about you? Lauren asked, interrupting his thoughts. Were you ever curious about your origins? I never searched, he answered honestly. My adoptive parents gave me everything I needed, a good education, opportunities. I never felt the need to know more. Until now, Lauren said, not as a question, but as a statement. Miles nodded slowly. The curiosity he had felt days ago had transformed into something far more intense, a sense of urgency he could no longer ignore, a missing piece of himself he hadn't realized he was searching for. Ryan was a good man, Lauren said softly, looking at her hands. A wonderful father. He worked as a civil engineer, building bridges. He said he liked the idea of connecting places, people. She smiled sadly. We didn't always have much, but we were happy. Then Noah got sick and... Her voice faltered. Miles could feel her deep pain, her daily struggle to stay strong for her children, while dealing with both grief and her son's illness and the financial difficulties. When Ryan died, it was like the world stopped, but it couldn't really stop, you know? Noah needed me, Ellie needed me. She took a shaky breath, regaining her composure. After the accident, I found out the life insurance he had was minimal. It barely covered the funeral. Then, 2 months later, Noah got worse. The doctors said he needed surgery the insurance wouldn't cover. Miles wanted to say something, offer immediate help, but sensed it wasn't time. Lauren seemed to need to speak, to share the burden she'd been carrying alone. It's strange, she continued with a faint smile. Of all the people who could have stopped at Ellie's lemonade stand, it was you, someone who... She didn't finish the sentence, but the thought hung between them. Lauren glanced at her watch. I need to get back to Noah. He gets anxious. If I'm gone too long... Of course, Miles replied, suddenly feeling lost. What was he supposed to do now? Leave and pretend this conversation had never happened? Return to his perfectly organized life? The idea seemed impossible, like trying to get back into a dream after waking. As if reading his thoughts, Lauren hesitated before turning away. I normally wouldn't do this, but would you like to meet him? Noah, I mean, he's having a good day today. The question caught Miles off guard. Meet the boy who had set this all in motion. Ryan's son, who he now strongly suspected, was his nephew. Yes, he responded, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I'd really like that. As he followed Lauren back into the hospital, Miles felt like he was stepping into the unknown. The carefully controlled life he had built seemed to be disintegrating around him. The hospital had its characteristic smell, a mixture of disinfectant, institutional food, and something undefinable that spoke of human vulnerability. Lauren walked the corridors with familiarity, greeting nurses and aides by name. Clearly, she spent a lot of time here. As they rode the elevator, Miles noticed their reflections side by side in the mirror. It was strange to think that only days ago they were complete strangers. Now they were bound by a coincidence that felt more like destiny. For the first time in a while, Miles felt strangely alive, as though awakening from a long sleep. Curiosity had turned to urgency, and urgency now took on a sense of purpose. Who was Ryan Carter, really? The man who shared his face, his birth date, possibly his blood. The man who built bridges, not just physical ones, but between people. The man who, even without many resources, created a family full of love. The man Miles would never meet, but whose absence left a strange emptiness in his chest. When the elevator stopped on the second floor, Lauren led him down the hall to a partially open door, room 206. Miles took a deep breath, preparing himself for what he might find on the other side, preparing to meet Noah, Ryan's son, the boy whose photo had changed his life. He looked at the boy, felt a lump in his throat, and said he needed to leave but that he would come back. Miles drove in a daze to his adoptive parents' home. The quiet suburb where he grew up felt oddly detached from the turmoil inside him. Well-kept houses, trimmed lawns, a meticulously organized life, much like his own until a few days ago. Harold and Margaret Morton had lived in the same house for 4 decades, a solid 2-story building, with ivy climbing the walls and a garden his mother tended with near-religious devotion. For Miles, it had always been the only home he knew. He parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, breathing deeply, trying to organize his thoughts. How does one ask their parents about a past they'd never questioned? How do you ask them to confirm a suspicion that might change everything? When he finally mustered the courage to leave the car, he noticed the living room curtain move. They already knew he was there, probably wondering about an unannounced visit on a Tuesday. Margaret opened the door before he could ring the bell. At 68, she still held herself with the same upright posture and shrewd gaze. Her hair, now fully grey, was arranged in the same bun he remembered from childhood. "Miles," she said, the surprise clear in her voice. "Did something happen?" "We need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is Dad here too?" Margaret nodded, opening the door wider. "He's in the living room. We were reading. You're worrying me, son." Miles entered, inhaling the familiar scents of lavender and old books. Harold was in his favorite armchair, a history book in his lap. At 72, the retired university professor had kept a sharp mind and undiminished curiosity. He adjusted his glasses upon seeing his son. "What a nice surprise," Harold said, marking his page before closing the book. "To what do we owe the honor?" Miles sat on the couch, waving off his mother's automatic offer of tea. A lifelong habit, to offer tea whenever someone visited, even if the visitor was her own son. "I need to ask something about my adoption." The silence that followed confirmed to Miles that he'd hit a nerve. Margaret glanced at Harold, a silent communication passing between them, the kind of connection forged by 4 decades of marriage. "Why now?" Margaret finally asked, sitting beside her husband. Miles hesitated. How to explain? He decided to be direct. "I met a family, a mom with 2 kids. The boy, he's identical to me when I was his age, and their father, who died recently." Miles took a deep breath. "He looked exactly like me, had my age, was born on the same day as me. He was also adopted." Harold removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. A gesture Miles knew indicated he was processing difficult information. You think he was your brother, Harold said, not phrasing it as a question. A twin brother, Miles clarified. Is that possible? Did you know anything about that? Margaret stood abruptly and left the room without a word. Miles looked at his father, confused, but Harold just motioned for him to wait. Minutes later, Margaret returned holding a small, ornate silver box that looked quite old. We never hid that you were adopted, Harold began, his voice taking on its professorial tone. But there are details we never discussed because you never asked. Margaret placed the box on the coffee table and sat again, her hands trembling slightly. You didn't come through an adoption agency, she explained. You were left with us. Left? Miles echoed, feeling reality shift under his feet. Harold nodded. We were young, newly married, trying for years to have children without success. That morning I went out to get the paper and there you were, a sleeping baby in a basket wrapped in a blue blanket. And there was this with you, Margaret added, opening the silver box and removing a yellowed envelope. We never opened it. It was addressed to you, for when you were old enough to understand. Miles took the envelope with shaking hands. There was no name on it. He opened it carefully, aware that he was about to discover a truth kept for over 3 decades. Inside there was a small piece of paper, yellowed by time. Only a few words written in hurried handwriting. I hope you can take care of him. Leaving him was the hardest thing I ever did. Nothing else. No signature, no explanation, no name. Just a desperate plea and a confession of helplessness. Miles. Read the note over and over, searching for something that wasn't there. No mention of another child, no further explanation. There was never any mention of a brother, Margaret said softly, as though reading his thoughts. Only you, left alone at our door. We filed everything legally, of course, Harold explained. The police searched for your biological mother, but she had disappeared. Since no one claimed you, you officially became our son after the legal waiting period. Miles looked again at the note, at the lack of a signature. The woman
brought him into the world with strangers.
The woman who apparently did the same with another baby, his twin, yet separately to another family. She separated us, Miles murmured to himself more than to his parents. But why? Harold and Margaret exchanged another troubled look. Miles, Margaret said gently, are you sure about this man? That he was your brother? Same birth date, same face, also adopted. Miles lifted his gaze from the note. That's too much coincidence, don't you think? And this family you met, Harold asked. Are they all right? Miles thought of Lauren, her exhausted eyes and weary smile, of Ellie trying to raise money with lemonade, of Noah, pale in a hospital bed. No, he answered honestly. The father, Ryan, died in an accident less than a year ago. And the son is sick, needs an expensive surgery. A heavy silence fell over the room. Miles folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Can I keep this? He asked, indicating the letter. Margaret nodded. It's always been yours. Miles stood, feeling strangely calm despite the revelations. A clarity he hadn't felt in days overcame him. I need to find out more about my biological mother, he said, and I need to help that family. Harold rose as well, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. What you've learned is important, Miles. But remember, family isn't just blood. It's choice. We chose you. And you can always choose who is in your life. Miles hugged his father, then his mother, with an intensity that surprised them all. When he pulled away, there was determination in his eyes. Thank you for telling me. For keeping this. As he drove back to his apartment, the letter secure in his jacket pocket, Miles felt different, like all the pieces of his life were rearranging themselves into a completely new picture. He had a brother. He'd had a twin brother named Ryan. A brother he'd never known and now never would. But a connection remained. Noah and Ellie, Ryan's children, his niece and nephew. For the first time in years, Miles felt a purpose beyond work, beyond contracts and numbers, something deeply personal, inexplicably vital, and he knew exactly what he had to do next. Miles didn't sleep that night. The note, now in its own box on his nightstand, seemed to radiate questions that wouldn't let him rest. Who was his birth mother? Why had she separated 2 twin brothers? And Ryan? The man he never knew but who shared his face, his blood, his origin. What had his life been like? When the first rays of morning light entered his luxurious and empty apartment, Miles was already up, ready. The decision had crystallized overnight, as clear and inevitable as the sunrise. He wasn't a man of half measures. When he decided something, he followed through. He called Jennifer, his assistant. "I need you to cancel all my appointments. For the next few days, maybe weeks." "Weeks?" Her voice betrayed her surprise. "But what about the merger with... Brian can handle it. Send everything to him and the legal team. It's a family emergency." Family? The word sounded foreign to both of them. In 5 years of working together, Miles had never mentioned family issues. Yes, family. He arrived at the hospital shortly after 8 in the morning. He parked in the same spot as before, but this time he didn't look for Ellie's lemonade stand. He knew exactly where to go. Room 206. On the way, he stopped at the reception desk. The employee glanced at his impeccable attire and confident posture. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak with the doctor in charge of the patient Noah in room 206. "Are you family?" Miles hesitated only for a second. "I'm his uncle." 20 minutes later, he left Dr. Phillips's office, the physician in charge of Noah's case. The reality was worse than he'd imagined. Noah had a rare heart condition requiring surgical intervention. The surgery was urgent, a matter of weeks, not months. And the total cost, including operation and post-op therapy, was astronomical. Miles climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, needing the motion to work off the anger and helplessness he felt. How could there be a system where money, or the lack of it, determines whether a child lives or dies? As he approached room 206, he heard raised voices. Lauren was arguing with someone. Miles quickened his pace. "I don't accept this." "There has to be another way," Lauren said, her usually calm voice trembling with emotion. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but as I've explained several times, the hospital can't..." Miles stepped into the room, interrupting the conversation. Lauren stood, eyes red and face pale. A middle-aged man with an administrative badge held a clipboard. Noah lay in bed pretending to sleep, but his clenched fists gripping the blanket revealed he was listening. "Is there a problem?" Miles asked, keeping his voice controlled. Lauren looked simultaneously relieved and embarrassed to see him. "Miles, I wasn't expecting..." The administrator eyed him with suspicion. "And you are?" "Miles Morton, Noah's uncle." The words now came easily. "And an investor in the Westlake Community Hospital." A lie, but one that could soon become true. The man swallowed, clearly recognizing the name or at least the tone of authority. "We were just discussing payment options." "You can stop worrying about that," Miles interrupted. "All of Noah's treatment costs will be covered in full." The administrator's expression changed instantly. "Well, that's excellent. I'll inform Dr. Phillips that..." "Please do. And tell him I want the surgery scheduled as soon as possible." The man nodded quickly and left the room. Lauren stared at Miles, stunned. "You can't, it's too much money." "I can, and I will." He approached Noah's bed, where the boy had given up pretending to sleep. "How are you feeling today, champ?" Noah gave a small smile. "Tired. But the nurse said I can have ice cream after lunch." "Ice cream is good," Miles replied, feeling a wave of unnamed emotion. This boy, his nephew, fighting something so huge, yet still able to smile at the thought of ice cream. "What's going on?" Lauren asked later, after Noah finally fell asleep for real. They stood in the corridor, seizing their first chance to talk alone. "Why did you come back?" Miles glanced at the room where Noah slept. "I found out some things about me, about Ryan, about how we ended up in different families." He told her about his visit to his adoptive parents, about the silver box, about the note. How it seemed he had been separated from Ryan at birth, each of them given to different families. "I don't know why she did it, who she was or where she is now," Miles concluded. "But I know Ryan was my brother, which means Noah and Ellie are my niece and nephew." Lauren looked at him with a mix of confusion and gratitude. "That doesn't mean you have to take responsibility for us." "I'm not taking responsibility," Miles replied simply. "I'm choosing to be here for Noah, for Ellie." He hesitated. "For you too, if you'll let me." Something in Lauren's expression broke. A barrier of pride, perhaps, or the weight of carrying everything alone for so long. She didn't cry, but tears shone in her eyes. You barely know us, but I want to know you, if you'll give me a chance. That evening, Miles was still there. He took Ellie to dinner in the hospital cafeteria, listening to her talk about school, how she drew pictures to cheer up Noah, and how she missed her dad. Then they went back to the room, where Lauren was trying to get Noah to eat some fruit. "Garifi, you staying to watch the show I like?" Noah asked, looking hopeful at Miles. "It starts soon." Miles checked his watch. In his normal world, he'd be at his apartment by now, reviewing contracts or reading reports, accompanied by an expensive glass of wine and silence. "Sure," he replied, settling into the chair by the bed. "I wouldn't miss it." Later, when Noah finally dozed off again and Ellie had been taken home by a neighbor, Lauren found Miles gazing out the hospital room window, watching the city lights. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. "You've already done more than enough." Miles turned to face her. There was a new certainty in his eyes, a purpose that went beyond the practical decisions he'd made that day. "I'll stay," he said simply. "Not just tonight, not just for the surgery. I'll stay as long as it takes." As Lauren smiled through tears she finally allowed herself to shed, Miles felt something click into place within him, something he hadn't realized was missing. He had no name for it, but it was warm, alive, and more real than anything he had felt in a long time. The decision was made. Miles would stay. Noah's surgery was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, Miles split his time between working remotely and being at the hospital. More and more, though, his attention turned to the small family who had, by some strange twist of fate, become part of his life. On the eve of the surgery, Miles arrived at the hospital to find Noah sleeping, sedated for final tests. Lauren was sitting by the window, watching the night slowly settle over the city. There was something different about her, a deeper fatigue, or perhaps the apprehension about the next day's operation. "I brought coffee," Miles said, offering one of the cups he was carrying. "Figured you might need it," Lauren smiled, accepting the coffee. "Thank you, you didn't have to. How's he doing?" "Sleeping. The doctor said everything's ready for tomorrow." She took a sip of coffee as though seeking courage in it. "You've been so kind, Miles, more than I ever expected from a stranger. We're not exactly strangers anymore, are we?" Miles pulled up a chair, sitting across from her but at a respectful distance. "At least not now." The silence that followed was comfortable, as though both had relaxed a bit from their initial defenses. Lauren looked at her sleeping son, then back at Miles. "You look so much like him," she finally said. "It's not just the face, it's your gestures too. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, how your eyes look when something surprises you." Miles felt a tightness in his chest. "Do you want to talk about him? About Ryan?" Lauren hesitated, then slowly nodded. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What was he like? What did he do? How did you two meet?" Lauren glanced again at the window, as though she could see the past reflected in the dark glass. Ryan was a mechanic. He'd worked at a shop since he was a teenager, eventually opening his own business. Nothing too big, a neighborhood shop, with regular customers. A small smile curved her lips. "That's how we met. My car broke down right in front of his shop. I was late for a job interview, it was raining, and I was on the verge of tears." "So he fixed your car?" Miles asked, trying to picture the scene. "Not only did he fix it, he lent me his car so I could get to the interview. A complete stranger, trusting his car to a woman he'd just met." Lauren shook her head, that smile now bright on her face, illuminating her tired features. That's how he was. He trusted people. He saw the best in them. Miles sipped his coffee, absorbing her words. It was strange and painful to hear about someone he'd never met, but felt deeply connected to. "Our life wasn't luxurious," Lauren continued. "Ryan worked long hours, and I got that job as an administrative assistant. We had just enough, but never much left at the end of the month. Still, we were happy." She paused, looking at Noah. "When we found out Ellie was on the way, Ryan worked overtime for months to get her nursery ready. Then with Noah, he did the same. He was always there for the kids, even after a tough day at the shop." He sounds like a good man, Miles said, feeling a strange mix of admiration and sorrow. The best I've ever known, Lauren replied simply. He was honest to the core. He couldn't stand lies or games. He said what he thought, owned, up to his mistakes. Our friends always said it was refreshing to be around him. No pretenses, no social masks. Miles tried not to think of the contrast with his own world, meetings where words rarely matched real intentions, negotiations, where the truth was just another strategy. A world so different from the one Lauren described. Did Ryan talk about his mother? Miles asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Lauren nodded slightly. Sometimes. They had a complicated relationship. Ryan was raised by her, just the two of them, but they grew apart when he was a teenager. He never mentioned a father. He said he never knew his father. His mom told him it was a brief relationship, that the man never knew about the pregnancy. Lauren paused. Ryan ended up bitter about it as he grew older, especially as a teen. It was a sore subject between them. Miles absorbed this slowly. The contrast between their lives was even deeper than he'd imagined. While he grew up with the Mortons, a stable, loving, if somewhat reserved family, Ryan had been raised by Grace, apparently alone. So he never knew about me? The question came out almost like a whisper. Lauren shook her head firmly. Never. Grace never mentioned that he had a twin brother. She kept it secret his whole life. Was shocked too when I realized it, Lauren admitted. After meeting you, seeing the resemblance, I understood that Grace must have made an impossible choice, keeping one baby and giving up the other. Is she still alive? Miles asked, feeling his heart pound. His biological mother? Lauren nodded slowly. Yes. Ryan kept in touch with her, although they weren't close. Her name is Grace Monroe. She lives in Millfield, a small town a few hours from here. Alone from what I know. The name echoed in Miles's mind. Grace Monroe. So this was the woman who gave him up for adoption while raising his brother. The woman whose choices had shaped their lives in unimaginable ways. Was Ryan planning to get closer to her again? Miles asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone. He thought about it, especially after Noah got sick. Thought maybe she could help somehow, or at least be present as a grandmother. Lauren sighed. But then the accident happened, and he never got the chance. Miles thought of the note tucked away at his home, of the simple words without explanations. I don't have the means. A mother who chose to keep one child and give the other away. Why? What impossible choice had led Grace Monroe to separate two twin brothers, raising one while giving the other up? Do you have her address? The question escaped before he could stop it. Lauren looked briefly surprised, then nodded. Yes, I have the address and the phone number. Ryan kept them handy, though he rarely used them. I'd like to have them if you don't mind, Miles said. I'm not sure I'll use them, but I'd like the option. Lauren studied his face for a moment, as if searching for something in his features. You're going to look for her, aren't you? You need to know why. Miles didn't answer immediately. Outside, night had fully fallen. In the bed, Noah shifted slightly but remained asleep. I'm not sure, he admitted finally. Part of me wants answers. Why she kept Ryan, why she gave me up, why she never told him about me. But another part, is afraid of what you'll discover. Lauren finished gently. Exactly. Lauren reached out, lightly touching Miles's arm. The simple contact felt charged with understanding. For what it's worth, she said, Ryan would have been happy to meet you, to know his brother exists, grew up well, and is here now, helping his family. Miles felt a tightness in his throat. Words that usually came easily were now stuck. Thank you, he managed finally, for telling me about him, for letting me be part of this. Lauren smiled, tired but genuine. The surgery is early tomorrow. Will you be here? I'll be here, Miles answered. In that moment, there was nowhere else he'd rather be. The clock in the waiting room seemed to run on its own rules. Seconds dragged like hours, hours like days. Miles couldn't remember the last time he'd experienced time like this. So present, so heavy, so unyielding. Noah's surgery had begun at 7:15 a.m. Dr. Phillips estimated 5 hours, maybe more. Heart surgeries are complex, he explained. We can't rush. Now 3 hours later, Miles watched Lauren pace back and forth across the waiting room, her steps measuring the space like a metronome. Ellie sat beside him, coloring in a kid's activity book a nurse had given her, though her eyes frequently darted toward the corridor leading to the operating room. "He's gonna be okay, right?" Ellie asked, her small voice breaking the silence. Miles, lost in thought, turned to the girl. His first instinct was to give a standard adult reassurance, but something in her gaze, a wisdom beyond her years, made him hesitate. "The doctors are doing everything they can," he replied honestly, "and Noah is strong, very strong." Ellie nodded, as though that contained all the truth she needed. She went back to coloring, but this time her hand was steadier, her movements more determined. Lauren stopped pacing and sat on the other side of Ellie, looking suddenly exhausted. "You should eat something," Miles suggested. "I can't." "Mommy, I didn't have breakfast," Ellie informed without looking up from her drawing. "Or dinner last night." Lauren shot her daughter a mildly betrayed look, and Ellie shrugged. "Daddy always said we shouldn't skip meals." A silence followed, not uncomfortable, but heavy with emotion. The mention of Ryan hung between them like a nearly tangible presence. "He's right," Miles finally said. "Come on, let's all go to the cafeteria, just a quick break. I'll leave my number with the nurse in case there's any news." To his surprise, Lauren didn't protest. Maybe she was too tired, or maybe she recognized the need to distract Ellie. The three of them walked down the corridor, a small group, united by circumstances Miles couldn't have imagined just weeks ago. At the cafeteria, Ellie chose a grilled cheese sandwich and strawberry juice. Miles ordered coffee for himself and Lauren, plus a fruit bowl they set between them on the table. "Tell me a story about Dad," Ellie asked, taking a bite of her sandwich. Lauren, who had been staring blankly at her coffee, blinked as if returning from far away. "Oh, what kind of story, sweetheart?" "A funny one from when I was a baby." A gentle smile touched Lauren's lips. "Well, there was the time your dad decided he could change your diapers better than I could." Ellie grinned, clearly knowing this story already but eager to hear it again. "He was so confident," Lauren continued, her eyes shining with affection at the memory. "He said it was a simple technical process, like changing a car's oil." Miles listened as Lauren recounted how Ryan, determined to prove his point, got hit by Ellie mid-change, ending in a comedic chaos of baby powder everywhere, a shocked dad, and a giggling infant. It was a simple, everyday family moment. But the way Lauren told it, the love in her voice, the sparkle in her eyes, the way her hands moved, brought Ryan to life in a way that shook Miles deeply. This was his brother, a man who changed diapers, compared babies to cars, and laughed at himself. A real man full of joys and frustrations, not just an abstract idea of kinship. "Your dad was always better at fixing things than dealing with baby surprises," Lauren concluded, gently touching Ellie's cheek. "But he learned," Ellie said proudly. "Mommy always says he became the best dad in the world." "He really did," Lauren affirmed. Then, looking at Miles, he would be so proud of both of them today. Ellie with her courage, Noah with his strength. A pause, then Lauren added softly, "And he would have been happy to meet you, Miles." Something tightened in Miles's chest. So many what-ifs. What if he had met Ryan before? What if they had grown up knowing about each other? How different would his life have been? They returned to the waiting room in a different mood. There was still tension about Noah, but there was also a quiet bond between them, an unspoken understanding. As Ellie resumed coloring, Lauren approached Miles. "Thank you," she said in a low voice, "for being here. It wouldn't be easy to do this alone." Miles nodded, realizing there was nowhere else he would rather be at that moment. It was a surprising thought for a man who had built his life around business meetings and contracts. The next few hours passed in alternating stretches of hushed conversation and long silences. Eventually, Ellie dozed off with her head on her mother's lap. Lauren told more stories about Ryan, how he spent hours fixing broken kids' toys, how he sang horribly in the shower, how he made animal-shaped pancakes on Sundays. Each story, each glimpse into Ryan's life, filled a space within Miles he hadn't known was empty. Finally, after nearly 6 hours, Dr. Phillips appeared in the corridor, still wearing his surgical scrubs. Miles and Lauren rose at once, Lauren carefully moving Ellie so she could continue sleeping on the sofa. The surgery was successful, the doctor announced. Miles felt Lauren sway slightly beside him. Instinctively, he offered his arm to steady her. Noah's a fighter. We'll need to monitor him closely for the next 48 hours, but I'm optimistic. Lauren covered her face with her hands, and for a moment, Miles thought she would break down into tears. But when she lowered her hands, she was smiling, a trembling, genuine smile. Can I see him? She asked. Soon, he's being transferred to the ICU. A nurse will come get you as soon as possible. When the doctor left, Lauren turned to Miles. Wordlessly, she hugged him, quick, almost impulsive, but full of emotion that words couldn't convey. Surprised, Miles took a moment before hugging her back. He wasn't one for physical displays of affection. But here, in this sterile waiting room with Ellie sleeping nearby and the news that Noah had made it through surgery, the hug felt completely natural. When they let go, Lauren's eyes shone with tears. She was still holding back. Thank you for waiting with us, she said simply. Miles nodded, unable to find words to express how he felt. Gratitude for being included, relief at the successful surgery, or something deeper, more fundamental. For the first time in his adult life, he felt he was part of something genuinely real and important. As he watched Lauren gently wake Ellie to give her the news, Miles realized something had changed within him. The hours of waiting, the shared fears, the stories about Ryan, the collective anxiety. All of it created a bond he had never experienced before. There, in that hospital, among people he'd barely known for a few weeks, Miles Morton had found something that not even his professional success or bank account or luxury apartment had ever provided: a sense of belonging. In the 2 weeks following Noah's surgery, Miles's routine changed completely. Mornings still started early with video conferences and business decisions, but afternoons belonged to Noah, Lauren, and Ellie. The hospital had become familiar territory. The security guards at the entrance greeted him by name. The nurses no longer had to check if he was on the visitors list, and even Dr. Phillips consulted him about decisions regarding Noah's treatment. On a Thursday afternoon, Miles arrived, carrying a paper bag in one hand and a small gift-wrapped box in the other as he rode the elevator. Noah had been moved from ICU to a regular room 3 days earlier, a significant improvement according to the doctors. The door to room 214 was slightly ajar. Miles tapped it lightly with his foot before entering. "It's me," he announced. Noah was sitting up in bed, connected to fewer machines now, although a heart monitor still blinked silently nearby. His face looked less pale, and there was a new energy in his eyes that hadn't been there before the operation. Lauren slept in a reclining chair in the corner, covered by a thin hospital blanket. Ellie sat on the floor at the foot of the bed, flipping through a well-worn children's magazine. "Miles!" Noah whispered so as not to wake his mother. His smile lit up his whole expression. Ellie looked up, her face breaking into a similar smile. "You made it. Mom said you'd be busy today." "I rearranged a few things," Miles said simply, placing the paper bag on a nearby table. "How are you guys today?" The doctor said, "My heart is beating stronger," Noah said proudly. "And I might be able to go home next week." "That's excellent news," Miles replied, genuinely pleased. Medical updates had been consistently positive, but hearing Noah's excitement made it more real. "I brought you some things." From the paper bag, he carefully pulled out 3 containers. "Roast chicken with veggies, fresh salad, and some brown rice. My housekeeper's recipe, best I know." Since his first post-surgery visit, Miles had noticed Lauren barely touched hospital cafeteria food. He started bringing home-cooked meals regularly, a small gesture that seemed to make a difference. Lauren protested at first, but eventually gave in when she realized how much the kids enjoyed the meals he brought. "And this," he continued, pulling out a book, "is for you, Ellie." It was a large illustrated book about constellations and planets. Miles had noticed her interest in the topic when she'd peppered him with questions about the stars visible from the hospital window. Ellie's eyes went wide. "Wow! It's just like the one we saw in the bookstore at the mall." "I thought you'd like one of your own," Miles said, feeling a wave of satisfaction at her enthusiasm. "And for Noah." Miles held out the small, gift-wrapped box. Noah accepted it curiously, still slightly clumsy as he tore off the wrapping. Inside was a brown teddy bear wearing a tiny white coat with a miniature stethoscope around its neck. "It's a Dr. Bear," Noah laughed. "Look, Ellie, he has a stethoscope just like Dr. Phillips." "That's what I thought," Miles said, smiling at the boy's reaction. "He can take care of you when the doctors aren't around." "I'll call him Dr. Bear," Noah decided, placing the stuffed toy carefully next to him on the bed. The noise and voices finally woke Lauren. She blinked, momentarily disoriented, before realizing Miles was there. "Oh, you're here. What time is it?" "Almost 4, Miles replied. "I brought dinner." Lauren smiled, still groggy. "You don't have to do this every time, Miles." "I know, but I want to." This had become a common exchange over the past few days. Lauren stating he didn't need to go out of his way, and Miles reaffirming it was no trouble at all. A delicate dance between gratitude and preserving her pride, between necessity and his desire to help. "Look, Mom, Miles brought me a star book and a Dr. Bear for Noah," Ellie exclaimed happily. Lauren glanced at the gifts, then at Miles, a complex expression flashing across her face, gratitude mixed with what might have been worry. "They're simple gifts," Miles said, correctly interpreting her expression. He knew Lauren feared. He was spending too much or raising the kids' expectations. "Just small tokens." She nodded, understanding what he left unsaid. Small tokens, yes, but meaningful to children who had gone through so much. "Dr. Bear, you have to check my heart," Noah announced, pressing the toy stethoscope to his own chest. "Is it beating stronger now?" Miles watched the scene, feeling a quiet calm settle over him. Every time he came to the hospital, each small gesture, whether a home-cooked meal, a book, or a toy, seemed to fill a space inside him he hadn't realized was empty. "Come eat something, Lauren," he suggested, opening the food containers, "before it gets cold." As he laid out the food on the small hospital table, Miles noticed Ellie watching him with a thoughtful expression. "What is it?" he asked gently. "Thank you so much for helping us, Uncle," she said, the simple words laden with sincere gratitude. "Uncle." The word hit Miles with a soft but profound impact. It wasn't the first time Ellie had used it, but at that moment in that small hospital room, sharing a meal with Dr. Bear on guard, the word carried all the weight and lightness of his new role. Miles smiled back, surprised by the emotion rising in his throat. "You're welcome, Ellie." Lauren caught his eye over her daughter's head, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of how small acts could build bridges across chasms that once seemed unpassable. There, in that simple moment, Miles realized with crystal clarity, he wasn't giving this family something. They were giving something to him. Noah with his bravery, Ellie with her openness, Lauren with her resilience. A purpose, a place, a title no professional achievement could ever grant him. Uncle. Small gestures, enormous meaning. The day Noah was discharged dawned bright, as though the sky itself was celebrating the boy's recovery. After 3 weeks in the hospital, 1 for the surgery and 2 for recovery, Noah was finally cleared to go home. Miles was there, as he had been nearly every day since the operation. He watched with controlled emotion while Dr. Phillips performed his final checks, explaining the necessary care, medications, and follow-up dates to Lauren. "Your heart is much stronger now, champ," the doctor said, smiling at Noah as he put away his stethoscope. "But you still need plenty of rest, okay?" Noah nodded seriously, clutching Dr. Bear firmly under his arm. "Yes, sir, and I have to take my meds on time." "Exactly. Will you be my best-behaved patient?" "Yes, sir," Noah repeated, smiling wide enough to light up his entire face, now with much more color than when Miles first met him. Ellie, who had been anxiously awaiting this day, practically bounced around the room, helping to pack the few belongings accumulated. Over the hospital stay. "We're going home, Noah. You'll see I fixed up your whole room, and Mr. Popcorn really misses you." "Mr. Popcorn?" Miles asked, curious. "Our cat," Lauren explained. "A neighbor's been looking after him." There was so much joy in that moment. Noah's improvement, Ellie's excitement, Lauren's obvious relief, that Miles nearly forgot the worry nagging at him for the past few days. A casual remark by one of the nurses had alerted him. "Mrs. Carter is an amazing woman," the nurse had said while checking Noah's vitals. "Raising 2 kids alone, dealing with Noah's illness, and still facing all those problems with the apartment." Miles hadn't pressed for details then, but the comment stayed with him. The previous night, he made some discreet phone calls. What he learned deeply concerned him. Now, as he watched Lauren methodically gather Noah's medications, Miles knew they needed to talk. But not here, not in this celebratory moment. A nurse arrived with a wheelchair, hospital protocol for discharges, and Noah, though he insisted he could walk, ended up enjoying the ride, with Ellie proudly holding onto the wheelchair handle, alongside the nurse. "I'll drive you all home," Miles offered as they headed down the corridor to the elevator. Lauren started to protest, but Miles gently interrupted her. "Please, it's the least I can do." In the parking lot, Ellie was visibly impressed by Miles's car, a sleek black luxury sedan, impeccably clean. For the kids, it was an adventure. For Miles and Lauren, the ride was silent, full of unspoken words. The address Lauren provided led to a modest neighborhood on the east side of the city, a complex of old buildings with 3 floors and no elevator. Miles parked in front, immediately noticing the signs of wear: peeling paint, clogged gutters, a crooked apartment for rent sign on the entrance gate. "It's on the 2nd floor," Lauren said, a slight defensive tone in her voice as though expecting a comment from Miles about the place. But he simply nodded, helping Noah out of the car while Lauren carried the bag of belongings and medications. "I can go up on my own," Noah insisted, but Miles noticed how heavily he leaned on the railing as they slowly climbed the worn steps. The apartment was small but clean and well organized. A living room opening into a compact kitchen, a short hallway leading to the bedrooms. Simple furniture, some clearly second-hand, but arranged with care. "We're home," Ellie announced, dashing ahead to show Noah around. Miles noticed the effort Lauren had made to prepare the space for Noah's return. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the center table, pillows were carefully arranged on the couch, a hand-painted "Welcome Home" sign, clearly Ellie's work, hung on the wall. "How about a snack before you rest a bit?" Lauren suggested to Noah, who now sat on the couch, visibly tired from the short trip, though he tried to hide it. "I can help," Miles offered, while the kids stayed in the living room, Noah resting with Mr. Popcorn the cat and Ellie proudly showing her latest drawings. Miles followed Lauren into the kitchen. This was the moment he had been waiting for to speak privately. Lauren opened the fridge, and Miles couldn't help but notice how sparsely it was stocked. A few vegetables, milk, eggs, but not much else. "Lauren," he began softly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She turned, slight tension visible in her shoulders. "Of course. In the past few weeks, since I met you and the kids, something has changed in me." Miles paused, searching for the right words. "I just found out I have another family. I never got to meet my brother, but I want to do what's right now. I want the chance to be close to my niece and nephew. I'm ready to give you all the best I can." Lauren stood still, her hand on the fridge door. Her eyes, so familiar to Miles now, studied him with a mix of emotions he couldn't fully decipher. "Miles, you've already done so much. The surgery, the visits, everything. It's not about what I've done. It's about what I want to do." He took a deep breath. "I know you're in a tough spot. The apartment—" Lauren shut the fridge door abruptly, turning away to the counter. "We're managing. I know you're behind on payments. There's a risk of eviction." She turned, surprise and discomfort clear in her face. "How did you—" "I looked into it," Miles admitted. "I just wanted to see how I could help." Lauren closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, there was resignation. After Ryan died, the bills started piling up. His life insurance barely covered the funeral. Then Noah got sick, and I had to cut down my work hours to take care of him. Her voice faltered. "I tried to keep everything afloat, paid what was most urgent, put off the rest. I thought I could catch up when Noah got better, but then—" "The surgery," Miles finished. Lauren nodded, brushing away a stubborn tear. "We're 3 months behind on rent. The landlord was patient because of Noah's situation, but I got a final notice yesterday." Miles felt a surge of protectiveness, so strong it startled him. The thought of Noah fresh out of the hospital and Ellie losing their home was unbearable. "Lauren," he said, stepping forward and on impulse taking her hand. "Let me help. Not out of pity, but because you're family." My family. For a long moment, Lauren just stared at their joined hands. When she finally looked up, something new shone in her eyes. Not just gratitude, but acceptance of something deeper than words. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. A silent, profound connection. "I'll take care of the back rent," Miles said, keeping his voice low so the kids wouldn't hear from the living room. "And I want to keep helping from here on. Not as charity, Lauren, as family." "It's hard to accept," she admitted. "I've always handled everything on my own." "I know, and I deeply respect your strength, but you're not alone anymore." A noise from the living room interrupted them. Ellie had dropped something, followed by Noah's laughter. The sound reminded them both of the real reason for this. "Conversation for them," Lauren said simply. "For them," Miles agreed, "and also for Ryan. And for us." In the days that followed, Miles acted with discreet efficiency. First, he settled all outstanding bills, rent, electricity, phone, without making a fuss about the amounts. He stocked the fridge and pantry via a grocery delivery service, telling the kids it was a welcome home gift for Noah. He arranged for Noah's medications to be delivered right to the apartment, removing one more burden from Lauren. Each offer of help was made gently, respecting Lauren's pride. He never forced anything, always asking, letting her maintain her dignity and role as the children's primary caregiver. A week after Noah's discharge, Miles was having dinner with them in the small apartment, a near-daily ritual now, when Lauren surprised him with news. "The landlord came by today," she said while they served dessert. "He's selling the building. All tenants have 60 days to move out." Miles felt the immediate tension in the air. Ellie paused, her spoonful of ice cream hovering midway to her mouth, her eyes wide with concern. "Are we gonna have to switch schools?" she asked. "I don't know, sweetheart," Lauren replied, striving to keep calm. "We'll find another place, don't worry." But Miles could see the worry beneath her composed exterior. Rent in the city was high, the market competitive, and with Lauren's recent payment history and fragile financial situation, finding a new place would be a significant challenge. "Mommy," Noah said, his small voice determined, "I don't want Mr. Popcorn to be without a home." "He won't be, honey," Lauren assured him, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Later, when the kids were already in bed, Miles and Lauren sat on the small apartment balcony. The evening was pleasantly warm, the sky dotted with stars, the same stars Ellie could now name thanks to the book Miles had given her. "I'll start looking tomorrow," Lauren said, gazing at the city lights in the distance. "There has to be something we can afford, maybe a bit farther out." Miles observed her profile in the soft glow from the living room. Over the past weeks, there had been a subtle but real transformation. The constant exhaustion was fading into moments of lightness, the ever-present fear about Noah's health easing into cautious hope, and between them, a friendship had started to grow, founded on mutual respect, on shared stories of Ryan, on genuine concern for the children. "Lauren," Miles said, voicing a decision he'd been contemplating for days, "what if I helped you find a place?" "Oh, you're already doing so much." "A permanent place," he continued, "somewhere safe close to the kids' school and the hospital for Noah's follow-ups." Lauren turned to look at him, a silent question in her eyes. "I want to buy a house for you," Miles said simply. Lauren froze, clearly taken aback by the offer. "Miles, we can't accept something like that. It's too much. Not for me." He gave her a kind smile. "Lauren, I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. I've always worked just to work, accumulated just to accumulate. But now, for the first time, I see a real purpose for it. But a house, a home," Miles corrected. "For Noah, for Ellie, for you. A place where you can feel safe, where you can rebuild your life." He paused. "And maybe once in a while there'll be room for an uncle to visit." Lauren looked at her hands, then back at Miles. When she spoke, her voice trembled with emotion. "Why are you doing all this, Miles? Really?" It was a question he'd asked himself many times in the past few weeks. The answer now was unmistakably clear, because when I look at Noah and Ellie, I see pieces of Ryan, pieces of myself. I see the family I never knew I had until a few weeks ago. He hesitated, then added softly, "And when I look at you, I see someone I love and deeply respect for your strength, your courage, your devotion. The word love hung in the air, not romantic, not yet, but still heavy with meaning. A love rooted in admiration, in a shared connection, in a common purpose. Lauren reached out, finding his hand in the space between their chairs. "Let's take it one step at a time," she said gently. Miles nodded, intertwining his fingers with hers, one step at a time, a new beginning for all of them. That night, as he drove back to his luxurious, empty apartment, Miles was already making plans. He would call his real estate agent the next morning, search for houses in safe neighborhoods with good schools. Maybe a place with a yard where the kids and Mr. Popcorn the cat could play. A new beginning, Miles thought, not just for Lauren, Noah, and Ellie, but for him as well. A new life, a second chance, a family. 3 weeks after the eviction notice, Miles parked his car in front of a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, less than 10 minutes from the children's school. The small but well-tended front yard was full of wildflowers. An old oak tree provided generous shade on one side of the house. Lauren, Noah, and Ellie waited on the sidewalk. He had convinced Lauren to come just to look at a house he thought they might like. She reluctantly agreed, still uneasy about the idea of Miles buying property for them, but the situation at the apartment had become more pressing each day. "Is this it?" Ellie asked, eyes wide as she took in the light brick facade and big windows. "This is it," Miles confirmed, stepping out of the car. In his pocket, he felt the weight of the keys he'd received that morning. The deal had been rushed through, thanks to his willingness to pay in full up front. "It's really nice," Lauren commented cautiously. "But Miles, I thought we were just going to see different options, not a specific house." Miles smiled, offering his arm to Noah, who still got tired easily from short walks. "Let's check inside first, okay?" He guided them along a stone path to the front door, a solid piece of dark wood. Lauren watched curiously as he pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "You already have a key. The realtor loaned it to me so we could take our time looking around without any pressure," Miles explained. A half-truth. He wanted them to experience the house before revealing he had already purchased it. The door opened onto a cozy living room. Natural light poured through large windows, illuminating pale hardwood floors. The house was empty of furniture but full of potential. "Wow," Ellie exclaimed, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. She immediately dashed off to explore, her quick footsteps bouncing around the house. Lauren walked slowly, running, her hand along the walls checking details with an analytical eye. Window casings, floor condition, light switches. Miles recognized the look of someone seeking problems, reasons not to fall for something that seemed too good to be true. "How many bedrooms?" she asked. "3. One for you, one for Noah, one for Ellie. 2 bathrooms, a small office that could be a guest room someday, and a dry basement that could be turned into a playroom or a rec room. A whole room just for me?" Noah's voice was full of awe. In their apartment, he shared a room with Ellie. "Come see," Miles invited, leading him down the hallway. The room Miles pictured for Noah had a wide window facing the backyard, where an old swing hung from a sturdy oak branch. Noah walked to the window, his eyes shining at the sight of the swing. Ellie had already found the room that would be hers upstairs. "Miles!" she hollered from the stairway. "There's a tree right outside my window. I can watch birds from here." Lauren stayed in the living room, her expression unreadable to Miles. "The kitchen's this way," he said, guiding her through an arch. The kitchen was simple but functional, with light wooden counters and enough space for a decent-sized table. A glass door led to a small deck out back. "It's a beautiful house, Miles," Lauren finally said, her voice low, "but it must cost a fortune." "Actually, it's within the budget we discussed," he replied, not mentioning how he'd set that budget at 3 times what Lauren believed possible. They continued touring the house, Ellie dashing between rooms, imagining out loud where each piece of furniture would go, where she'd store her books, how she'd decorate the walls. Noah followed at a slower pace, taking in each detail with a serious, contemplative look. When they regrouped in the main living area, Miles knew the time had come. He once again pulled out the keys from his pocket. "Lauren," he said, extending the keys toward her. "This isn't just a viewing. I've already bought this house." Lauren froze, her eyes moving from the keys to Miles's face. "What?" "The house is yours," Miles said simply. "Or rather, it's in your name. All the paperwork was finalized this morning. Ellie, who had come back to the living room just in time to hear, let out a shriek of joy. "It's ours! For real!" "For real," Miles confirmed, his eyes still on Lauren, whose expression fluctuated between shock, disbelief, and something deeper. "Miles, I can't accept this. It's too much." Her voice trembled slightly. "Yes, you can, Mommy," Noah said, who had quietly approached. "Please?" Miles took a step forward, still holding the keys. "Lauren, when I met you all, I discovered a part of myself I didn't know was missing. You gave me something no money can buy, a sense of belonging, of family. This house isn't charity, it's gratitude." A tear escaped, sliding down Lauren's face. She wiped it quickly, but another followed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you accept," Miles said gently. "Say you'll let Noah have his own room, let Ellie watch birds from her window, let yourselves build a home here." Lauren looked around at her children, Ellie practically vibrating with excitement, Noah gazing with quiet hope, then back at Miles. Slowly she reached out and took the keys. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Miles felt something inside him expand, a warmth that started in his chest and spread outward. The look on Lauren's face, gratitude, relief, hope, was worth more than any financial transaction he'd ever made. Ellie immediately dragged Noah off for another round of exploration, this time certain that the house was theirs. Their footsteps echoed from room to room as they discussed paint colors and where to put their things. Lauren and Miles remained in the living room, a moment of quiet between them. "I need to show you something," Lauren said softly. She opened her purse and took out a small wallet. From it, she removed a folded photograph, handling it almost reverently. "This is the only recent photo I have of Ryan." Miles took the photo carefully. In it, a man was holding baby Noah in one arm, his other arm wrapped around a younger Ellie. He was smiling at the camera, a wide, genuine grin that lit up his entire face. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. It was like looking into a mirror, but not exactly. Same eyes, same face shape, same nose, yet there was something about Ryan's smile, an openness, a carefree joy that Miles didn't see in himself. "He loved being a dad," Lauren said quietly. "He used to say it was the only thing that really mattered in this life, to love and be loved." Miles couldn't respond. A lump formed in his throat, an emotion so intense it caught him off guard. It was grief for someone he'd never known, anger at the lost time, gratitude for the bond found through the ones Ryan left behind. "He would have liked you," Lauren went on. "He would have been so happy to know he had a brother." Miles finally found his voice. "I wish I had known him." "You are getting to know him," Lauren said, glancing meaningfully toward where the children's animated voices drifted through them. That night, when the kids finally collapsed from excitement, Lauren set up makeshift mattresses in the empty living room. Noah, who had struggled with sleep in the apartment, drifted off almost immediately, his face calm and content. Ellie took longer, still whispering excitedly about paint colors for her room, where to put her book collection, and how to arrange her drawings. Lauren sat on the back porch steps, gazing at the backyard bathed in moonlight. Miles joined her, offering a mug of tea he'd brewed using a small electric kettle they'd brought along. "Thank you," she said, accepting the mug. After a moment, she added, "For everything." Miles nodded, looking up at the stars. He had never felt so at peace, so sure he was exactly where he was supposed to be. A simple house, but filled with warmth. A new start for Lauren and the kids. And for him, something even more precious. A real home. The road to Millfield wound through gentle hills, leaving the buzz of the big city behind. Miles drove in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel. The address Lauren had given him sat on the passenger seat, along with Ryan's photo that she insisted he take. 2 weeks had passed since the move into the new house. Seeing Lauren and the children settle in, seeing their eyes light up again, had strengthened his resolve. It was time to face the last mystery, the missing piece of the puzzle. Grace Monroe. Millfield was small, fewer than 10,000 residents, the kind of place where everyone knows each other by name, where time seems to move at a different pace. Miles slowed down when he passed the welcome sign, checking the address again. Maple Street 157, a modest one-story home with a small front yard of hardy flowers fighting off the early fall chill. A narrow porch held a rocking chair and a few potted plants. Miles parked out front, sitting in the car for a few minutes, trying to steady his pounding heart. What would he say? Which question would he ask first? The anger he'd felt upon discovering he'd been separated from his twin still burned, but now it was mixed with curiosity, with an urgent need to understand. Finally, he summoned his courage and stepped out. Each step along the stone path to the door felt weighted with significance. He took a deep breath and rang the bell. Light footsteps approached from inside, and the door swung open. A woman in her 60s stood there. Grey hair framed a face that, despite life's wear, still held traces of beauty. Her eyes, the same color as Miles's, widened in shock. "My God," she breathed, one hand lifting involuntarily to her mouth. "Grace Monroe?" Miles asked, his voice steadier than he expected. She nodded, speechless for a moment, her eyes filled with tears as she took in every detail of his face. "Miles," she finally said, not as a question but a statement. "You found me?" Hearing his name on her lips, the immediate recognition confirmed what he already knew. This woman was his birth mother. "May I come in?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral, battling the storm of emotions inside. Grace stepped back, opening the door wider. "Yes, of course." Inside, the house was as modest as the exterior suggested. Simple furniture, some quite old, but tidy and well-maintained. Framed photos were scattered around. None of Miles or Ryan, he noticed. They sat in a small living room, the silence between them heavy. "How did you find me?" Grace finally asked, her hands twisting in her lap. "Through Lauren," Miles answered. He saw immediate recognition in Grace's eyes. "Ryan's wife," she said softly. "So I met his kids first, Noah and Ellie." Miles paused. "Ryan died about a year ago." Grace closed her eyes, pain evident on her face. "I know," she whispered. "I read about it in the local paper. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't think I'd be welcome." Silence again. Miles noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Why?" His question came out harsher than intended, laden with decades of unanswered questions. Grace looked directly at him. "Forgiveness," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I ask for it anyway." Miles remained silent, waiting. Grace inhaled deeply, as if summoning the strength for a long-buried story. "I was 16 when I got pregnant. Your father, your biological father, was older, 22. When I told him, he just disappeared." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "My parents kicked me out. It was 1980, a small town, a pregnant teenage girl. I ended up in a shelter for homeless women." Miles listened quietly, the picture taking shape in his mind. "I didn't know there were twins until I gave birth," she went on. "It was a shock. One baby was already hard enough. 2, I had no money, no education, no support, nothing. I spent the first few weeks trying to care for both of you, but I was losing it." Her voice cracked. Ryan cried less. He seemed easier to calm. "And you needed more medical attention. You were born with a small respiratory issue." Miles frowned in surprise. He had never known that. "The doctors said you needed care I couldn't provide," Grace said, tears flowing down her cheeks. "So I made the hardest decision of my life. I found a family who could give you what I couldn't." "The Mortons," Miles said. Grace nodded. "I looked into them. They couldn't have children. They were stable, educated. I thought you'd have a better life with them. And you decided to keep Ryan," Miles added, the old hurt welling up. "I couldn't give both of you away," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "Losing one child was already too much, and I thought I could raise one on my own. I was young and naive. I didn't know how hard it would be." Miles thought of Ryan's life as a mechanic, of how he had lived simply. He contrasted it with his own privileged upbringing, the opportunities he'd had because of the Mortons. "Why didn't you ever tell Ryan about me? Why separate us completely?" Grace lowered her gaze. "Cowardice," she admitted. "At first it hurt too much to talk about you. Then, as the years passed, It became harder and harder to explain why I'd hidden the truth for so long. She hesitated. I was afraid he'd hate me for the choice I made, blame me for separating you. Miles processed her words. The anger remained, but he could see her situation through new eyes, a frightened teenager in impossible circumstances. When you were born, Grace said, I had no means to raise 2 babies. I was always poor, working menial jobs, living in tiny places. Ryan never had much, but I tried to give him what I could. Miles pulled out the photo Lauren had given him and handed it to Grace. That's Ryan, he said, with his children. Grace took it with trembling hands. A sob escaped when she saw the image of the son she'd lost. He looks happy, she whispered. He was, Miles affirmed. Lauren told me he was a good man, a good father. He was a good son too, Grace said, still staring at the photo. Even when things got difficult between us. Miles studied her for a long moment. The anger and grief remained for the lost brother he never met, for the years gone. But something else emerged, understanding, empathy for the terrified young woman Grace had once been, forced to make impossible decisions alone. For years, Grace said, handing back the photo, I imagined this moment if you'd ever find me, what I'd say. No explanation feels enough, I know. Miles felt something shift inside him. Not complete forgiveness, not yet, but a step toward peace. You did what you thought best at the time, he said finally. Grace nodded, relief in her tired eyes. When Miles stood to leave, Grace stood as well. For a moment they faced each other, mother and son separated by decades of absence. Then, wordlessly, Grace opened her arms. Miles hesitated just a second before stepping into her embrace. It was awkward, laden with complex emotions. The pain didn't vanish like magic. The questions weren't all answered. But there was honesty now where there had once been only a void. Driving back to the city, Miles felt different. The story was complete, imperfect, painful, but complete. Ryan would never know the truth, but Miles could carry it for both of them. Maybe one day he would tell Noah and Ellie about the grandmother they never knew. Not today, not tomorrow, but when the time was right. The road ahead seemed clearer now, even as the sun began to set on the horizon. 6 months had passed since Miles found Grace. Time, as always, brought changes, healing some wounds, strengthening fragile connections until they became solid bonds. The routine that once felt strange now flowed naturally. 3 mornings a week, Miles drove Ellie to school before heading to the office. On Thursday afternoons, he accompanied Noah to follow up medical appointments. Weekends were spent at the house he had bought for them, filled with voices, laughter, and the occasional family dispute. Because, as Miles discovered, not even the best of families are free of minor conflicts. Lauren smiled more now. The burden she'd carried alone for so long was shared, allowing her to rediscover parts of herself she'd stifled after Ryan's death. She'd gone back to painting, a hobby abandoned in her grief. Her watercolors now decorated the new home's walls. Even Grace found her place in this new family structure. The first visits had been tense, weighed down by unresolved history. But over time, and especially through the immediate connection she formed with Noah and Ellie, Grace became a regular presence, bringing homemade cakes and stories of Ryan. As a child, one bright Saturday morning, Miles drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of town for the first time by himself, though he'd accompanied Lauren and the kids a few times. There was something he needed to do, something private between brothers. Ryan's grave was simple, a granite headstone bearing his name, dates, and the inscription, Beloved Father, Husband, and Son. Miles gently placed a small bouquet of flowers he'd brought. Then, feeling both foolish and compelled, he knelt on the freshly cut grass. Hey, Ryan, he began, voice low but firm in the cemetery's stillness. It's me, Miles. Your brother. The words still felt strange, precious. I wish I'd known you. We grew up in different worlds, but fate still bound us together. A bird sang in a nearby tree as though offering encouragement. I've met your kids. Ellie is sweet and strong. She has your determination, I hear. And Noah, Miles smiled. Noah's a little fighter. Doctors say he's fully recovered now. They're amazing, just like I imagine you were. Miles ran his hand across the cool granite of the headstone. tracing the letters of the name he shared far more than just a birth date with. Lauren showed me photos and told me stories. I feel like I know pieces of you now. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Grace is in their lives too. It took a while, but it seems we're all finding a way forward, together somehow. The breeze stirred the leaves above, dappled light and shadow dancing on the grave. You can rest now. I'll take care of them, your family, as if they were mine. Because now, they are. Miles lingered a few more minutes, allowing himself to feel the loss of the brother he never knew, but also gratitude for the unexpected gift he found through that loss, a family. When he returned to the house late that afternoon, he found Lauren and Grace in the kitchen cooking together, a scene that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Noah was in the living room, deeply focused on a building set. Ellie, hearing Miles come in, ran to greet him enthusiastically. I made something for you at school, she announced, handing him a colorful sheet of paper. It was a drawing in bright markers, 6 figures holding hands in front of a house, each labeled in childish handwriting. Mom, Ellie, Noah, Uncle Miles, Grandma Grace, and in the sky, surrounded by clouds and a smiling sun, Dad. At the top, in big uneven letters, we're a family now. Miles felt a lump in his throat. His eyes grew moist as he took in the simple yet profound representation of who they had become. Do you like it? Ellie asked, a bit anxiously. Miles knelt to her eye level, smiling through the emotion. I love it. It's perfect, Ellie. Satisfied, she ran back to help in the kitchen. Miles pinned the drawing on the fridge, alongside other cherished family mementos. He paused to take in the scene around him, the house alive with sounds and aromas, with people bound by choice as much as by blood. Family isn't just who raises you or who gives birth to you. It's who chooses to stay. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.